Attending your event, Tim. Well, I think that we are now, wow, we're up to 95 participants. This is great. I think we could probably start on in. Tristia, would you like to start us off or should I?
Well, sure. I'm happy to. I'm happy to get us started. So first, thank you very much. Welcome to day 2 of the summit. Really glad you can be here. Just a few initial notes. A lot of us here today were here yesterday, and today is going to be a less formal day than yesterday. Yesterday had a lot of presentations. You saw PowerPoints. Today is much more built around conversation, and shout out to McCormick for the idea of having space that we would hold for community to really dive into some of the topics that we heard about. So, there will be some sessions that do have presentations, information that attendees will get. Some of these sessions, like for example, all of the spaces that I will be in today are conversation spaces where we don't have any formal agenda, but there are some questions that were raised, topics that deserve discussion around some of the issues that we addressed yesterday. I've got a few things that I can note specifically about some of the sessions yesterday, kind of key takeaways, and I know some of the other session leaders who put together those great panels for you have takeaways that they're going to share as well, and we'll get to those in a moment. But one big picture thing that I wanted to address is yesterday we talked a lot about vehicles. Graham, I hope you're okay with me sort of making this particular point. I know this is one of the things that you talked about, us really distinguishing, in addition to today being more conversational, less formal, really more about community and diving into issues. We also have something of a different focus in our sessions today. Yesterday, there was a lot of discussion of vehicles as temporary shelter. People who, regardless of whether they accept or reject the stigmatized label of homelessness, are occupying their vehicles as a form of temporary shelter and would not choose that, not exclusively, but a lot of the content was around folks who would not choose that as their primary form of housing. But we know that the group of vehicle residents is large and diverse, and there are a large number of people who see their vehicles as their long-term housing, the housing that they desire, housing that they own. They have different policy needs than people who are using their vehicles as forms of temporary shelter. And there are a lot of other needs that we'll be kind of getting into today. And as we think about this community, this large inclusive community of vehicle residents, I think we want to be clear that while yesterday had its focus, that's not the focus of the collective. You're going to hear a lot more today about long-term living in vehicles, how they can be forms of housing over the long term, how you can live and thrive in vehicles, and some of the unique needs around that, like long-term parking spaces for vehicles, as opposed to access to more traditional housing sources. All of these are legitimate needs. Everybody has a place in the collective. We'll also have an opportunity for allies, attorneys, organizers, service providers to talk more about how we can support the vehicle residency community to live with the freedom and dignity that all people deserve.
Exactly, and can I just add on that real quick, Tristia? I thank you so much for what you said, Tristia. And I think that this also gets to what Bob had mentioned yesterday during the opening plenary about a big tent approach, that we are really trying to bring in sort of the wide diversity of vehicle residency, the wide diversity of people who live in vehicles, the types of vehicles you live in, and the places where you live in vehicles, and really try to not approach this from what's sometimes termed as a deficit model, something that says, oh, this is inherently bad, we just need to fix this. We're really trying to say, we want to understand what are the benefits that people get out of living in a vehicle? How does a vehicle help to solve some of the challenges that people have in their lives? And what do those challenges tell us about the systems? Where are the breakage points? Where are things that we can fix? Where are ways that the powers that be, the establishment, the national groups, all these different groups that want to help, parking providers who are here who want to help, how can they learn from people with lived experience who are are every day navigating the world of vehicle residency and can help to educate those who want to lean in and help make a difference, to help to support your lives. So I really want to thank you all for attending and for bringing the diversity, just all of your experiences to the table. They're all important, and they all help us to learn more about each other. And it helps us to sort of cross-pollinate the ideas that we're doing, to share the innovation that each of you are able to bring and help to share that with others. You'd be surprised how much people who may be living in a vehicle as a, you know, as their housing during retirement, or during just for travel, or for recreation, or their preference, that the strategies that they found to that they use to find places, to find resources, to safely live, can be very helpful for people living in similar vehicles all across the country in different ways. So we want to make sure that we're able to raise that awareness and raise that information, and help to really share your expertise, your knowledge, the important work that you're doing with others who can benefit from it.
So I think now might be a good time for us to take a look back at yesterday, some of the things that we covered, both within specific sessions, as well as kind of some larger themes that came up both in sessions and in the chat. I know that I'm not the only one with slides, and I'm not the only person who organized some sessions. I'll go ahead and kick us off, and then we can move on to others. So I'll try to be fast. Share my screen here.
Just real quick, I'm sorry, before you do, Tristia, would we like the other presenters to share their screens? Because I thought, I wasn't sure if they were going to be included on yours. They do? They should?
Well, so, sorry for everyone watching the sausage get made. I did not put everything together in a single PowerPoint. I'm happy to do that if that's easier. So I will, I'll go in and grab the other slides. Why don't I go through mine quickly? Graham will turn it over to you, and I'll pull the slides from the email, and we'll get those up. I'm happy to share them, and then the session organizers are welcome to the floor.
Great, thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, so let's do a screen share. Really appreciate everyone bearing with the technology. I know that we all learned, a lot about Zoom over the last few years, but some of us still struggle, and I am in the struggle. I'm deep in the struggle. All right, so you all can see my screen? Okay, great.
Yes, you're in presenter mode, just so you know. I don't know if you want to do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna try to do this. Play from start. All right, so let's go ahead, and there we go. That looks better?
No, oh yes, there it is. Yep.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you all. So, we had some sessions yesterday, and the ones that I organized, as you might imagine, had a law and policy focus. So the first was fighting poverty tows. Poverty tows are tows of vehicles based on inability to pay tickets, or based on inability to register a vehicle, or inability to find a lawful place where you can park because you're unable to afford the few options where private parking might be available. All of those things would qualify as poverty tows. Some of the big takeaways, and we heard from organizers and attorneys yesterday who've been able to effectively fight against poverty tows, some great resources that came out of that session that you can find later on the vehicleresidency.org website, along with the recording of that session. But some big picture takeaways. One, you have rights. You have a right to possession of your vehicle and to not be unreasonably deprived of that vehicle. That is a constitutional right that you have under the Fourth Amendment. If they are going to take your vehicle, and by they, I mean, anyone in government, police, anyone else who's working as an agent of the government, if they are going to take your vehicle or any of your property, or deprive you of any rights that you have under the Constitution, you're entitled to due process. Some of the basic fundamentals of due process is that you should have advance notice before any deprivation of property, and there should be some way to contest permanent deprivation of that property. We know that so often when tows occur, that is it. That's the total loss of that property, and often everything that is contained within that vehicle, because it is so expensive and difficult to get those vehicles back. There are ways to fight back. Now, a lot of these administrative challenges are difficult. Usually all the government would need to prove is that it had a legal justification for towing and impounding the vehicle. And we live in a world where there are a lot of ways to get parking tickets or to violate the use of a vehicle in public space. And we heard, a bit about those the growing body of laws that make it impracticable to live in a vehicle in many public spaces, especially in urban settings. Despite the fact that there are limited administrative avenues to fight towing and impoundment, we heard about the value in the fight. Sometimes you will win. And even when you don't win, you are able to improve the systems. You're able to get information that can help position you and other vehicle residents in a better place to prevent those unnecessary, harmful tows that are often illegal. And there are affirmative, arguments that could be made in courts to stop the bad practices. A few things just in terms of strategy tips, we can and should advocate for each other. So one of the things for us to think about, especially in the context of administrative hearings where you don't need to be an attorney in order to advocate for another person, we can all advocate for ourselves, get information about how to do that. Recommendation that we call in advance, call the entities that you can usually find online to find out what's the process for challenging a tow. What would you need to show? What's the timeline within which you would need to submit, a notice of challenge, or what other paperwork would you need to submit? What paperwork could you show to help improve the likelihood that you'll win? And all of those things are pieces of information that we can get for ourselves and that we can get for each other. The collective could be, and this is something we'll talk about later, this could be a source of advocacy and a place where we come to get people who will stand up for each other, watch what happens in these hearings, help gather information, and support each other so that we're not violated and harmed by poverty tows. We also had a session on criminalization of vehicle residency. I'll go really quickly over this one because we talked about this kind of as a theme in some of the plenaries. Laws criminalizing vehicle residency are growing and are really prevalent. They're the fastest growing law that we would call an anti-homeless law. And I don't mean to use this label homelessness carelessly. Vehicles are our homes, and even when they're used as temporary shelter, they're still your home. And I recognize that homelessness is a stigmatized label. So I want to be clear when I talk about homelessness, I'm really referring to how the law defines the use of vehicles as shelter or housing. Under the federal definition, a person occupying a vehicle is not seen as occupying a home, and they are counted, if they're counted, but would be defined under federal law as a person experiencing homelessness, and increasingly subject to policies designed to target and punish life-sustaining activities, which comes at the cost of freedom, comes at the cost of dignity, comes at the cost of your rights. There are ways that we can fight against that, and there are great offices that are starting to do that, and lawyers who really want to do that. Some of them are here today, several of them are here yesterday, and are part of the legal working group that has been part of this collective. And then finally, we talked about all as a group, federal and state policies. Some of what I took away, there was a lot to take away there, but some of what I took away is that vehicle residents must be heard. The Capitol Hill here in DC is not familiar with, not knowledgeable about vehicle residents. Despite vehicle residents being a large group of people, there are a lot of people who are just entirely ignorant or who have stigmatized views or narrow views about what vehicle residents want and need. And that's why you see policies that are written to provide prioritized overnight parking spaces for RVs when much of what I hear is that RVs, folks occupying RVs are not looking for temporary overnight parking spaces. They're looking for longer term parking options. You know, the policies are in part going to reflect the information that we're able to give to lobbyists and lawmakers. So, you know, we as a collective can improve how laws and policies address the needs of vehicle residents by collectively being heard and ensuring that people have information. And policies are needed to serve your actual needs. Lawmakers should not be making judgments about what vehicle residents need from their ivory towers. They need to be making policies designed to meet needs. You are the experts on what you need. You are the experts on what policies are able to achieve those needs, support your needs. You know, part of what we hope the collective can do is amplify voices to make that happen. And then the last thing I'll note is that state laws can be a source of relief. So it's not just the federal government. There are other governments that can and should be addressing the needs of vehicle residents. Some big picture takeaways is that one, community matters. You know, Graham and I were talking about this afterward. One thing we expected is that we would have a great group of people. We expected really well-informed presentations by people who would provide wonderful content. That was expected because that's what the collective has been working for a long time to present. What I didn't expect, and I don't know that Graham expected it either, is the way that we were able to, and you know, I'll just speak from my experience. It really struck me that we built community, a sense of community. There were people who said that they felt heard, they felt seen. And I would like to think it's because this is a community where people are heard and seen. That is a core goal of the collective. It's about building power collectively, but it's also about being a safe place. This is a team where we are all together working for the common good. This is a large and diverse group of people. They have different vehicles, different geographic locations. You can see this map. You know, these are all the different locations where people who registered for the summit registered from. And you know, this is a snapshot of the United States. This is a national issue. Of course, there's going to be diversity of all types. That is a good thing. We have common interests. We want to ensure that all people are able to have liberty, that they're able to live in dignity, make their own choices about the form of shelter or housing that they occupy, are free from governmental oppression that perpetuates systemic racism, perpetuates oppression of people in poverty. These are things that we as a collective can work to address. Yesterday really felt like we had some special moments where we were doing that, not just through advocacy, which is the lens that I'm used to seeing these things in, but also through community, which was really beautiful and touched the heart. And you know, we can and will build power together and like the tide, rise together. And it's a beautiful thing to see. So I'm going to stop sharing now and turn it over to Graham.
Thank you, Trustee. I'm not even sure how to follow that up. That was great. And I literally have to say there at the end about building community. It's funny where I've often been asked if we're you know, organizing a social movement, and I say no, we're not. We're responding to a social movement. There's a growing number of people who are living in their vehicles and have been doing so for quite some time, long before we envisioned bringing this collective together. This collective grew out of conversations with many of you. It grew out of knowing you and you sharing your experiences and knowing that we needed that there was a value in creating a space for this community to come together. That these communities already exist. People like the Home on Wheels Alliance has been doing such amazing work for so long. People in you know, where I'm from in Seattle, people in the, you know, all across the West Coast, across the East Coast, across the South, I mean the Midwest, we have people who are seeing the emergence of vehicle residency in their community and have been seeing this for quite some time. Of course, people have been living in vehicles since people have had vehicles, right? So this is nothing new. I often say vehicle residents are innovating a new form of housing. I don't think that's true. I think it's a long-term form of housing. People have used vehicles for quite some time, but people are you all, whether you're living in vehicles or you're working with people who live in vehicles, you're seeing the rise of the number of people living in vehicles in our communities, and we're coming together to help better include all of you, all of us, all of our neighbors into our community, and really into our total society. And we really appreciate everything you had to do. And I mean, if there was one takeaway from my side, I won't put up my slide. If you attended, it was a lot of information, but it was you know, in general, I think it was that point is that a growing number of people in this country simply cannot afford the costs of housing and the costs of living, that many are on limited and fixed incomes, and even if they can afford it, they don't want to put their money into that system. They don't want to necessarily put their money into that tenancy system. They don't feel comfortable in those housing systems. They feel much more supported and healthy and safe living in their vehicles as long-term. And we want to find ways that we can help to include people living in vehicles, either as transitional housing, if that is a transitional housing, if this is a place that helps to move someone into permanent housing, if that's what they so desire, or spaces for people, and protect those spaces for people who are already living in their vehicles as long-term housing. And I'm very excited today for some of the sessions that are going to be talked about. I know Phyllis, I'll call you out real quick, is going to be talking about the use of finding spaces, finding resources, and a lot of it is actually from the perspective of people who can actually rent that space. You can get into a campground, if I remember correctly. Phyllis, would you actually like to speak a little bit about your session?
Yeah, it'll be after listening to yesterday's sessions, I have to say mine will be really focused on a different slice of vehicle dwelling. It'll be more about people that are not tethered to the services of town as much as I heard about yesterday. The people that you'll meet today will they do what we call stealth camping in town, but they also do a tremendous amount of living out on public land like national forests and Bureau of Land Management land. So it'll be a little different than what we heard yesterday.
That's well, and this is why I think it's so important, Phyllis. And thank you for sharing that, because while we may see that as different, I can imagine there are people on this call who may be living in cities who go, wait a minute, there's places I could park for longer term where I could actually, you know, not get ticketed. I could actually have, you know, some you know, get water connection, get electricity connection, have a sewage, or just be able to park for extended periods without getting the knock of doom that I think so many people are familiar with. So, you know, while the information that you're going to be sharing in the conversations, you may see them as sort of, you know, maybe different from yesterday. I don't see them as that different. And I think that they actually can really offer a lot of great information for people who can learn so much. So I encourage anybody who's looking to learn more about those subjects to attend Phyllis's session, which I think is our next breakout room. And I also noticed that there's a couple of questions that are coming through the chat. I want to make sure we get them, but I also want to make sure that we have a chance to cover some of the other presenters. Tristia, have you had a chance to do that yet? You have. Okay, great.
Yes, I've been able to pull up Karina's. My computer is incredibly slow, so I am going to share my screen. Karina, are you available to talk about the slide that I can pull up here?
Sure.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you all for bearing with me.
And I will say, my slide gives short shrift to the other fantastic presenters in my session, just because I didn't have as much access to what they were going to say as I did to what I was going to say. So this is a summary mostly of what I talked about, with some highlights from Beverly in Wisconsin and Ben in Colorado. We were talking about, so we are service providers. We have safe parking programs. How do you deal with angry neighbors? How do you build political and community engagement and support for specifically safe parking programs? So these tend to serve people who are using their vehicles as as temporary shelter. So it is a pretty specific group. So this is more talking to people who are trying to support those kind of social service programs. Some of the points were to identify who your stakeholders are, because these are a lot of different people. It's people who are using the program, who are supporting the program, those who hate the program. You really need to identify those groups who have an interest, and whenever possible, embed yourself in those groups. So we talk about how dreadful some of the social media is, but if you're on Nextdoor, if you're on Facebook, Be Neighborly, you're going to hear those comments first. You're going to be able to respond to them appropriately. And never promise what you can't deliver, and listen more than you talk, and lead with curiosity. I know in the beginning, I used to think that anybody who had a complaint was a terrible person. And I learned through listening that we all think of ourselves as good people, and we want to think of ourselves as good people. And there's common ground there. There's values that we all hold that can lead conversations in better places. So it's really important to be accessible, to be easy to find and to get a response from. And if you can't do that, find somebody who's gonna jump on problems that arise and respond to them and dispel myths and work to fix problems. And then find a way to bring people together that's not based on the problems or differences. Before the pandemic, we had fantastic weekly community dinners where our neighbors, our congregation, our vehicle resident neighbors were all invited to have dinner together once a week. And that was a space I could invite anyone to: elected officials, city staff, somebody who was, mad about a broken down car on the street, and donors and people who are like, I want to help. And I'm like, no, first come and eat dinner with us, be a guest, and come into the community on equal footing with everybody else and see what it's like. Also, keep on asking yourself, if I wanted to complain, if I had a problem, how could I do it? And if you want people to come to you, make sure you are the easiest person to come to. And then I talked about being the neighbor, joining the neighborhood board, following the social media, and just being both part of the group that includes the vehicle residents and part of the group that includes the housed folks. And Beverly, when we had talked earlier, we had really hit upon the theme of being open to unexpected allies, that going into conversations with curiosity, of not assuming people were against you just because they had a question or a concern, but also don't assume people were your allies when they might not be, and to be ready for those unexpected challenges or barriers. And just to build those relationships with, especially folks, if you're offering services, you need to build relationship with folks who are both using those services and folks who are choosing not to, so you can make your services better. We also, during my session, heard from Chris Wilkerson, who talked about the pump out program in Seattle, and I don't have any of his information on here, but that was to highlight the fact that the city utility found value in offering a really important service to vehicle residents because it made fiscal sense. Like, instead of punishing people for dumping waste on the ground, they said, well, how can we make that stop? And then we don't have to clean it up. And they went sort of upstream. I guess that's a pun, upstream to prevent the problems and save the city money. And that's a great way to bring more people to the table, when you can appeal to fiscal conservatism, right? This actually makes sense, much like Housing First. If you can explain, we're going to save you money, that's a really strong argument when the moral arguments are not taking hold.
Thank you, Karina. That was a wonderful summary of your session, and such a great session too. I really thank you for sharing everything you had about community building, and Chris Wilkerson's program, and really the point being that data can really drive this work that unfortunately while the stories I think are what's important to so many people. For a lot of city managers, the numbers, on a piece of paper, the money is what's the bottom line. And so being able to present things in those terms can actually be very effective in getting services developed. I also want to give a chance. We're running low on time, but I want to make sure that Jake and Jamie can maybe talk a little bit about the presentation that they're going to be doing.
Sure. I'm going to talk for Jamie because we've been fighting over lines every time we rehearse.
Well, and I'm sorry, Tristia, did you have one to share? I just want to make sure that we're correct.
I think this is great. My computer is crawling, but I'll just flag Bill. Bill Sweeney, another instrumental member of the Summit Planning Committee, also sent over a slide, and I'm working on downloading that and sharing that.
Okay, great. Well, sorry to interrupt. Jake, please.
Actually, I have it up if you guys can give me share screen.
Go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, and so I think it'd be great to hear from Jake and Jamie, and then we kick it over to Bill.
Sure.
And then Tristia, if you want to pull up my slide for when it's my turn to talk, that'll work in the meantime.
That sounds good. So why don't we reverse that, what I had just said. And Bill, if you want to share your screen, that's wonderful. And Jake, I will download your slide now.
Super. Okay, Bill.
You're muted, Bill.
There
There you go.
we go. All right. So very quickly, we were looking at providers of services that are an emerging group of offerings in the United States now. We focused in discussing what programming might look like. We focused on the importance of knowing the people we serve or want to serve, the resources we can access and use in that, and the clarity of our goals in our service. A lot of the discussion was around the fact that this is an emerging sector, and the importance was identified of getting acquainted and getting organized. That would probably help both us as service providers and our guests in the long run. So that was where we were.
Great, thank you, Bill. That was short and sweet. And one thing just to say too is that you are absolutely correct that these are emergent programs, and that there's not a lot of data around them. And though we do see that they can be very successful for people, some people, like myself, I don't mean to highlight myself, but there are researchers out here who are trying to collect that data and who are trying to show how these programs operate, how they can be effective. If you are a local operator of a program like that, or you're a local municipality that's looking to start a program and you'd like to learn more about that, or would like to even do research on the efficacy of these programs, please contact me and we'd love to talk with you further about how to show how these models work and also to improve them where that can be done. Jake, would you like to go next?
And Jake, I have
Sure
it.
thing. Okay, yeah, show when you want. So Phyllis touched on the idea that we do not have to live in the city to survive and thrive in our vehicles. And Jamie and I and many people who have learned from Cheap RV Living, Bob Wells, participated or followed Homes on Wheels Alliance hints and ways of living on public lands. Jamie and I do that pretty much exclusively. And we're going to talk about how some of those public lands and overnight parking spaces that some of us use occasionally, like a Walmart parking lot or a rest area, are being closed off to vehicle residents or campers or anybody traveling in an RV or vehicle, and what we can do about it, because there are risks, but we can help mitigate some of those risks. I think that's pretty much all we have That'll be our
That's great.
session.
Again, short and sweet. That was great. Thank you, Jake. I've seen your presentation before. For those of you who have, or a version of it, for those of you who attended the Rubber Tramp Rendezvous last year, actually, it was in seeing Jake and Jamie give a presentation on this that sort of one of the things that inspired this whole session and really this whole summit. So thank you, Jake and Jamie, for the great work you're doing. I can't wait to
And
see
he
that
stole my
session.
lines again.
He's good at that. I want to do we have any more to present, Tristia? I want to make sure that because we do have a question from the chat that I would love to ask, but I want to make sure that we have a chance to cover any of the other sessions.
I think, and shout out if we missed you, but I think that has covered the sessions, and I think it would be great to take some questions.
Great. And so first off, is there anybody who would like to cover their session that we didn't cover? If you did, please let us know. We'd love to highlight your session. Tim, I know you were breaking up a little bit before, but I don't know if you're interested in speaking a little bit about it. Yes, you would. Great. You have the floor. I'm not sure if Tim is having some technical difficulties. I noticed that you were breaking up a bit before, but Tim, are you able to speak?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I'm using the phone dial-in, by the way. Thanks, everyone, and hello, Graham and presenters and organizers. My name is Tim McCormick. I'm in Portland, and I'm speaking or plan to speak later at 1 p.m. Pacific time, 4 Eastern, and my title is Vehicles as Housing, Housing as Vehicle. And this is taking a sort of a broader view and looking at like what is a vehicle and what is housing in sort of legal historical sense, and observing that it's actually very blurred in many ways, practically and even legally. And then also talking more broadly about how it's actually a good way to look at all housing as a vehicle for other ends and means, and a way that we can transform ourselves and our surroundings. So look forward to joining you there. I've also posted a link to the presentation, and we'll have that up during the presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tim. Thank you so much. And thank you for always pushing us for more inclusivity, for having new ways for people to join and to share information, to see it, particularly to reduce any barriers that might be occurring. So we really appreciate you pushing us to always do better.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean that very sincerely. I want to make sure that very much. We really appreciate you. The one last question I do want to say, and unless anybody else would like to raise anything, is that we have a question that was actually asked yesterday, and I think it's a really good one, and it kind of gets to the bigger picture, and it leads to actually as a little preview for our final plenary today. Our final plenary today, at the very end of everything, will be going over sort of looking forward into 2023. We want to end on a note of calls to action. What can we do? What can we do in the next year? What can we do in the next 10 years, right? And even going forward, how can we come together as a community? How can we build this organization, this collective, into something that's self-sustaining, that is able to do more of the work? We worked hard to get together to cross this finish line of yesterday and today of getting this summit out. And now that we have, of course, we want to do another, but we also want to do more work. And we want to make sure that work is centered in your experiences, in your needs, and where you think that work can do the best. So we'll talk more about that, about inviting everyone in, how we want to develop our governance going forward. But please attend our final plenary if you're interested at all in joining our work. Again, if you've signed up on our website, we apologize if we haven't gotten back to you already. We've just been doing so much stuff. But if you are interested, you can sign up at vehicleresidency.org. There's a sign up link there to join one of our collective groups. And we'll be talking about that too. Maybe we need more work groups too. So we'll be talking about all of that in that final session. Really encourage you to attend if you have time. The question that I wanted to get to was a question actually for Tristia, because it's a pretty it's a pretty complicated question, but it kind of takes it to a larger, even international perspective. The question is, how human rights organizations can support in practice against the criminalization of vehicle residency. What is some of the work that, you know, on a national level, on a local level, but I would even say on an international level, Tristia, because we talked a lot about this, about international human rights, can we support from a human rights perspective people who are living in vehicles?
Yeah, you know, I love that question because I think that is the exact right lens to view any type of service program, policy, and form of housing. There is an internationally recognized human right to housing, and it has 7 elements. I think maybe what we'll do for the plenary session, I don't have them available now, but we'll take a look at them. And I wanted to just highlight a couple things. So the 7 elements address things like security of tenure, ability to be secure in the housing that you have. So that obviously implicates issues around criminalization of homelessness. One of the ways that criminalization policies are used against vehicle residents is to make them literally homeless without shelter or housing because the vehicle is seized from them as part of the enforcement of a law, or they are subject to loss of their vehicle when they are arrested and jailed for using that vehicle as a form of housing. I see that we have our human rights guru on the call. So happy that you're here, Eric. Thank you. Eric Tars, the legal director of the National Homelessness Law Center. I'm going to call on you in just a moment, Eric, if you wouldn't mind to kind of chime in. But first, I want to mention a project that the Law Center has and will be available probably by the end of this year or certainly next year. And that is an analysis of different programs. Some of them will include parking programs using a human rights lens. So that would analyze parking programs and different policies against the 7 elements of the human right to housing, which are all founded in human dignity. And that really is the core: dignity, wellness, liberty. These are the foundational principles on which any free society exists. And so the human rights principles are intended to help inform how we approach vehicles as forms of housing, or any type of structure or dwelling as an adequate form of housing. Eric, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Sure, thanks. Hey, everyone. I think, so yeah, so a couple of things. One is that there are these very established standards at the international level around the human right to housing, as well as around other things like cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or torture. And that those things have been applied through our work and through the work of others specifically to the issues around homelessness, vehicle residency, et cetera. And so there's also a right to healthcare, right to adequate food and nutrition that complement these rights. And we can think about how we can use all of them in comprehensive ways. And the great thing about these systems is, just like our own legal system, they're still evolving. They're still, we are able to participate in them. And so we just came through this past summer the review of the US under its commitments under the International Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, talked about the racially discriminatory impacts of criminalization and of the lack of adequate housing, and got some really great recommendations from the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination that specifically say the US needs to abolish laws criminalizing homelessness and take steps to remediate the harms that it's caused. It addresses homelessness or criminalization of homelessness as cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment, which is very parallel to our own 8th Amendment cruel and unusual standard. And so we can use that in our legal work. But it's also very powerful to say that, international human rights bodies have found what we're doing as unacceptable. And so this could also be used as a tool to highlight issues of local criminalization in your local community. We would love to bring some folks to Geneva next time there's a review to testify on these matters, collect information to put into reports, and think about what are the standards that you'd like to see developed that they could be applying to the issues of vehicle residency. So it's you can use it. You can use the standards that are already established, and think about how to build new standards and use these mechanisms. And the Law Center's very happy to be a resource on all this. We've got lots of reports on our website at homelesslaw.org/human rights. Maybe we'll do a session on it in the future.
Thank you,
That
Eric,
sounds
so
great.
much. And I just want to say real quick, that question came from Shumel. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your name. But Shumel Yerushalmi. I want to make sure that we thank you for asking that great question. And Eric, one question I had too, and please correct me if I'm pronouncing your name incorrectly. One question I had too was that I learned from you about the right to residency as part of the human rights. Can you maybe talk a little bit about what that means, the right to residency?
So the human right to adequate housing, as Tristia was saying, has these 7 different elements that make up the right. So it's not just 4 walls and a roof over your head. It's things like the legal security of tenure, your right to stay where you are. It's the affordability, accessibility, habitability, the location, cultural adequacy, and the availability of services, materials, and infrastructure in the community that make that housing adequate. And so you can think about, often in the legal world, we talk about this bundle of rights that are inherent within the bigger rights. And so there isn't a specific right to residency like enumerated as such, but every human being, as part of their inherent human dignity, has this right to adequate housing, and that inherently means they have to be able to live somewhere. And the kind of accessibility prong of the rights, the legal security tenure prong of the right, these things are the kinds of parts of the standards that we can look at to say, people have to be enabled to live somewhere. So I don't know if that's getting at the question you were asking, but
no, that was perfect. That's perfect. Exactly. That's what I wanted to get at. For those who don't know, the right to stable tenure means that it is the right for you to be able to have a residence and securely hold on to that residence and not have it taken from you. And so we could see how that very much can apply into the work that we're doing here with vehicle residents. And thank you, Eric. That was very, very helpful.
I just want to say, just to add, I am putting in an article that Eric wrote that I think provides a really nice overview. So this is a short article. It's about 4 pages, but I would highly recommend reading that for a great overview of the human right to housing. And I think you'll be able to sort of readily see how it applies to the interests of the collective. Thank you, Eric.
And we have about 5 minutes actually until the next session is supposed to start. Again, we're trying to do these in 45 minutes and have a 15-minute break. But this conversation has just been so wonderful. These are exactly the kind of conversations we've been wanting to have. Thank you for all your great questions. I don't think we're going to be able to get to them all, here, but in this particular session, but we hope to get to them in the other conversations today. We have a great group of moderated conversations that will be occurring. Obviously, we just highlighted several of them. I encourage you to stick around for the rest of the day. We're going to be doing the same format as yesterday. This will be the main room that you're in. If you come back, you can use the link that you've had to keep rejoining into this room if you have to step away. Once you get into this room, once we move into the breakout sessions, you should receive the option to join a breakout room. It's going to be all done the same way it was yesterday, and I think that's everything. Is there any other technical stuff that I'm missing, or anybody have questions on any about that?
I would like to mention that if any of our phone call-in people would like to be moved into one of the breakout sessions, just to pipe up and let us know, and we can move you in manually.
Thank you, Marika. Yes, yeah, we can move you if you just let us know. Thank you so much, Marika. That's really helpful. And Cappy, I noticed you just said if we're going to provide a list of links to the session, there aren't other links. So you only will have the one link that you've used to get in here. This is the main room, and then we do breakouts from these rooms. So there is no other links, just a single link that you received.
Graham, I think it's a little bit different than that. I think she's asking, there are many links that are in the chat. And if the chat
Exactly.
is saved and posted, then those links will be available. But otherwise, if the chat will not be available after the meetings, will the links be lifted and put into a page of some sort?
Exactly.
That is a great idea and a great question. Thank you for bringing it up, and thank you, Phyllis, for clarifying, because that is not how I read that question. Thank you very much. We are saving our chats, so thank you for bringing that up. I think it's a great idea, and any kind of information that's publicly available, I think it would be great for us to create a document of links. I know that Tim already does a lot to share information publicly, but I know that I would be happy for us to be able to create a space also on the vehicleresidency.org site, so that we can start to share this great information. And yeah, and we can save the chat to the computer. I'm not sure if everybody, I think you can all save it on your sides, I think, but if you don't, or you don't feel technically savvy enough to do so, don't worry about it. We'll do it, and we'll also update that as well. Or if you're on a phone, I should say, it might not be able to do that.
It's just easier if the links are with as a session that with a recorded session.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But
that's a good point. And that also brings us to the issue about recordings. So we did make recordings of the sessions yesterday. They were successfully, I think we were able to get all the sessions. We're still kind of checking on a couple of the breakout rooms to make sure that they were recorded correctly. But we did at least get the vast majority of the sessions recorded. We do intend to upload those. We've talked about uploading those possibly to our website at vehicleresidency.org, and maybe even also YouTube or YouTube, so they can have more widespread attention brought to them. And for the sessions today, we would love to record them, but we also want to recognize that these are conversations where people may not want to have that information recorded. So we're going to talk with each one of the organizers and see how they feel about it. And maybe the organizers, you might want to ask in your sessions, if people feel comfortable, maybe at the end or the beginning, to share them as a recording. If people don't want to record them, we're totally fine not. We don't want to, we don't want to expose anyone or anyone's private information, and we also don't want to stifle any conversation. So if it's better that it's actually not recorded and publicized, so that you can have a more productive conversation, we would rather that you're able to share the information. That's what this is for. But happy to do either way.
Graham, since we're going to be starting the next group of sessions, can you go ahead and let people know what will be in this main room, and if they want to join the criminalization discussion, they can go into that breakout once it's open in a couple of minutes.
Great, thank you. Yes, absolutely. So in this main room, we will be having how to live and thrive in your vehicle with Phyllis, who just talked a little bit about the session. The general topic discussion is where to park, how to access and use public services, and how to meet basic needs. In our breakout room, we're going to have another conversation track talking about continuing the discussion from yesterday on the criminalization of vehicle residency. I saw a lot of great questions and comments that were made in the chat. If you would like to follow up on that, please join the breakout room. That's going to be hosted by Tristia. And I'm not sure which one I'm going to join. So I want to see both as well. So this is why we hopefully will be able to video them and share them as well. So we have about 1 minute until we go in. So you know what? Why don't we take a little break? If anybody wants to take a 1 minute break before we start on in, we don't need to shut down anything. We'll just stay here, but we'll give everyone just about a minute so that we can have a breath and grab a quick cup of water or coffee or something.